put yourself in a position where you can't retreat, where it's do or die, sink or swim. Here's what you'll find out. You'll develop incredible swimming skills. You'll find yourself stroking unlike you've ever seen before. Through the inspiration of desperation, you'll become more creative than ever before. Throw your whole self into it. All you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough. But make sure you do all you can do.
Welcome to another episode of Burning the Ships presented by 608B Capital. And this is a special episode. It is our 100th episode that happens to coincidentally, and this was not planned, but it is being released on exactly 1 year to the date of our first episode release. So 100th episode and 1 year episode, or 1 year anniversary simultaneously. So before I introduce my guest, I want to talk a little bit about this podcast, the evolution of it, the start of it, where it originated out of, and where it has come and where it's going. So if you guys remember, anybody that's been following along from the beginning, this was, and for the better part of this past year has been really done with no goals, no intent, no vision, no nothing. The podcast was strictly started as a kind of a selfish venture for myself, right? And what I mean by that, not that I'm a selfish person, but when we started this podcast, I was in a moment where I had left my corporate career at the end of 2022. And I knew that in doing that, everything that I wanted was on the heels of that, right? I wanted more time, more mental presence, all that stuff with my family and myself, that my former career was not conducive to. I loved my job. I loved everything about it, most things about it. What I did like is as I advanced in that career, the time and attention that was required to do it, and that's time and attention that was taken away from my family. My mentality is not very well cut out for a corporate, bureaucratic type corporation. When I'm not able to exercise my my creativity and things of that nature, I'm not at my best. And that is nothing against the company I worked for, because as companies go, they were phenomenal. But for me, I spent a lot of years doing things against who I actually am, right? And under a corporate structure, I was never meant to be an employee. I just never was. I'm not wired that way. But I didn't have the courage early in my life, early in my adult life, to do things on my own. As I was able to build a business on the side of my corporate career, that courage became stronger and stronger to the point where I had built something that allowed me to step away from that career and burn the ships. Burning the ships. That is where the podcast name came from. Burn the ships on my corporate career, as did Bill Phillips, one of my business partners, did the same thing. So the biggest void I knew that was coming on the heels of that was my ability to have a positive impact on people, right? I spent so many years since I was 23 years old, first in sales and being an insurance advisor, right? I handled folks, their property and casualty, their home and their auto, and I got to advise them on that. But more importantly, I handled their life insurance needs. So that put me in a very, in my perspective, a very powerful situation where I was able to sit down at people's dinner tables and really dissect their finances and their life's needs and their needs for the generations behind them and help them construct a plan to take care of that through life insurance products. That was very valuable. I had a very big impact on people's lives doing that. As my career evolved, I got into leadership, management. I had teams under me. That scratched an even bigger itch for me. I got to motivate people. I got to inspire people. I got to help them solve complex situations and problems. And I got to help them shoot for very big goals and achieve those goals. And we did that together. And I got to, as I evolved even further in that career, started to have a big influence on new agents within the company, new sales reps that were coming into the company. And I got to serve as a mentor to a lot of those folks and speak to them in a lot of different ways, you know, as they were going through training and stuff like that. And that stuff was very important to me. So I knew as I left that career, not having that influence was going to create a very big void in my life. So I knew one of the ways to fill that void was a podcast, right? A chance to get to continue to, and it's not people right there in front of me. You know, I'm putting stuff out there for people to listen to and watch, but it was a way for me to get my thoughts out there, to talk to people, get guests on here where I can really be very inquisitive and pull things out of them that will help inspire folks, motivate folks, and things like that. So I knew that that was going to give me a platform to do that and kind of start backfilling that void that I left behind in my corporate career. Well, I couldn't dive into that right out of the gate. I had to, right out of the gate, focus on building the thing I left for, which was my business. And I continue to build that to this day. But I couldn't have any distractions. And the podcast was, if I had done the two simultaneously, that would have been a distraction and probably slowed things on the business side down. So after about, 11 or about a year, December of 23. So we're about a year after I left my job, it was time. It was time to launch the podcast. And I made two commitments. One was I was going to take action. I wasn't going to worry about having things perfect. I wasn't going to worry about a perfect microphone, a perfect camera, a perfect background in the videos and things like that. I was going to go. That was my first commitment. Once I started, there was no stopping. I was going to go. I prioritized just doing it and taking action over doing it perfectly. And I do that with most everything in my life. Number two, once I started, I wasn't going to stop. I was going to be consistent. At first, it was going to be one interview a week. That quickly turned into an interview a week and then a weekly ramble where I get on here and just ramble about whatever comes to my mind. But once we got that ball rolling, there was no stopping it. I was going to bank episodes. I was going to make sure we always had episodes ready to go every week, twice a week. I've done those two things. I took the action. First, several episodes were recorded with my iPhone and no microphone. The audio and the video was on my iPhone. We evolved to little Bluetooth mics that we were using for a while. That evolved to a little bit nicer mic. I think I spent $100 on my first nice mic. And then that evolved to now we have really nice professional grade microphones, both Bluetooth and this one I'm talking in today. We also evolved to, a nicer camera. So I record all the rambles on a very nice camera that allows us to have a more quality type of product that we're putting out there and chop it up in reels and put it on social media. It's just visually better. And it sounds better. Our guest, fortunately, even when I started, I was fortunate enough to have a very big network of folks that were doing big things. So it wasn't hard for me to get guests, but I wanted to keep evolving and getting more influential guests on here, folks that have done big things and can share their big things and how they've done them and how they've burned their own ships in life along the way. So that was very important to me, and that has evolved. But still, to this day, as I record this and as we get ready to release our 100th episode, still don't have a very big vision for this podcast. All I know is that I want to stay true to the two commitments I made in the beginning. I was going to always do it, release 2 episodes a week, and I was going to prioritize doing it, taking the action, and we'll continue to do that. We have some very big things coming as we roll into past 100 episodes and into 2025. some very good guests lined up. And we've already had some great guests, but some very good, powerful guests that I'm excited to sit down and chat with. We're going to have, from a visual standpoint, a much better product that's going to be able to allow us to share a better visual really on social media as we chop things up into reels. So I'm excited about where all that's going to go. But here we are a year later into it, 100 episodes, which really makes us, and 99% of podcasts do not make it past episode 3, I think. And then 99.9% don't make it past episode 10. So I'm very proud of what we've done so far. Now that leads me into today's guest, episode 100. Most of my episodes, if a lot of my episodes, interview episodes, are with folks. The very first time I'm meeting them is when I hit record and we sit down and I'm literally having an introductory conversation with them. I know a lot about them from researching them, but it's my first time speaking to them. I didn't want episode 100 to be that. I wanted it to be with someone that I know very well, but also that I know has a good story, a good burning the ship story. And this individual has 2 of them, really. And we'll get into that in the episode. But I wanted it to be somebody that I could sit down with. I kind of know in and out. They know me in and out, and we can just vibe and have a good conversation. So with that, our 100th episode, our guest today is Larry Hagner. Larry is the founder and host of the Dad Edge podcast, one of the top podcasts for fathers looking to optimize their lives. He is a coach, author, and speaker dedicated to helping men become better husbands, fathers, and leaders. Through his platform, Larry shares actionable strategies and insights on parenting, relationships, health, and mindset, fostering a supportive community for dads around the world. Larry's work stems from his own experiences growing up without a consistent father figure and his journey to becoming a better man for his wife and 4 sons. His honest, practical, and relatable approach has inspired countless fathers to build stronger connections with their families while pursuing personal growth. So I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Mr. Larry Hagner. Larry Hagner, welcome to Burning the Ships, my man.
Jason, what is going on, man?
What's up, brother? I am fired up. As folks just heard in the intro, a lot about you, and we'll get into all this, but this is our 100th episode. And, as we approached it, as we started this thing a year ago, because this is coming out on the exact 1-year anniversary from our first episode, and this is number 100. But we had no vision, no goals. It was just a way for me to just spew out whatever's on my brain and get some interesting guests on here. And we've done that, but I wanted 100 to kind of be a celebration. And I wanted to get, I have a lot of guests lined up that, a lot of times I'm meeting them for the first time when I hit record on these podcasts, which is fun. That's a challenge for me to engage in good conversation, but I wanted number 100 to be somebody that is special to me and somebody that I know very well. And I've gotten to know you very well prior to actually meeting you through your podcast, but now I've kind of joined your tribe and gotten to know you very well. So Larry, I am super grateful and very excited to have you on for our 100th guest.
Me too, man. I'm so excited. And by the way, congratulations. I remember when Dad Edge hit episode 100 and I was like, wow, we're like actually in 3 digits now. So it's like, it is a huge milestone. It's really, I don't know what the stats are. I mean, the Dad Edge got started 10 years ago. So but I want to say, man, like for you to even be at 100 episodes, you're probably in the 1%ers of podcasters. Cause I think a lot of them just burn out from what I understand after like 2 or 3 months now.
Yep. Yeah. And I've seen the same thing. I haven't really dug too much in the stats, but you mentioned your podcast, the Dad Edge podcast. And that's where I first got introduced to you and everything that you're about. And so I listened for quite a while before actually connecting with you. But it's not just a podcast. You've been going 10 years and you've got some exciting news that I think you just found out right before we started recording. So share that with the folks.
Yeah, man. And if you hear it in my voice, I got like a little misty eyed. My assistant sent over today that officially for 2024, we hit #1 in the dad podcast, or in the dad space, for #1 podcast for dads, for the 7th year in a row. So
Amazing.
like, dude, that's like the oxygen sometimes in your lungs that you need, because like, I mean, I think a lot of people think if you have a podcast, you just buy a mic, you record, and like you just like whatever. There's so many things that go into it, so much work, so much planning. Like the podcast alone, takes up, hours and hours of time. You got to get the guests, you got to research the guests, you got to be well prepared. I mean, and then you got to produce it. It's got to be production, and like, it's a lot,
Yeah.
but I love it, man.
Yeah. And we everything you just said, we've done the exact opposite as we've launched it. My mentality is always just, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just got to take some action. And I knew I want to do a podcast. So I think I just mentioned to you, our first 40, 50 episodes were done on my iPhone. Like it was just getting it done. And now we're starting to ramp things up a little bit. But dude, for you to have 10 years in, over 1,200 episodes?
1,260 episodes. Like I just looked this morning, so I was like, how many episodes do we have? But yeah, that's how many.
And I jotted down a few names that I've heard on your podcast: Matthew McConaughey, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. People know him. Tim Kennedy, Brad Lee, and you just had Chuck Liddell on. I haven't listened to that full episode, but big, really the one of the founding members or fighters in UFC. So through your, I would say, just getting to know you through your authenticity and the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you really dig in and peel the layers back when you talk to guests and stuff like that. It's built an audience, and you've been able to get some very influential guests on. So hats off. Congratulations on being #1 again. And we are just starting our journey in this space, but I'm excited to sit down with you and dig deeper into who you are, my man.
Oh, I can't wait, man. Thank you.
Yep. So the theme of the podcast, the name of it, Burning the Ship. So when I think about you, Larry, and what I've gotten to know, you have essentially burned the ships in two different aspects of your life, right? So the name for our podcast was inspired by myself and Bill Phillips leaving our corporate jobs and, burning the ships, if you will, on that part of our lives to go all in on entrepreneurship. Well, you did that as well. And that's kind of like your one area that you burn the ships. But then you also burn the ships on Larry Hagner, the husband, the dad, the man, all of those things. So I kind of want to break those up into two chunks. And we're going to start on the leaving the career or the W-2 corporate career and building what you have now with Dad Edge. And then we're going to wrap it up with the powerful stuff. That is Larry Hagner, the man, the family man, all those things. So let's start with walk us through your career journey. I know you were in sales at a high level, what that looked like, what inspired starting the Dad Edge, the podcast. I think it started with the podcast or a blog or something you were doing. But walk us through all that, the evolution, and what led to that moment where I am burning the ships on this corporate career. I'm betting on myself and I'm going all in. So walk us through that.
Yeah, you bet, man. So I graduated college in 1999, and I graduated with a degree in sports medicine and exercise science with a minor in nutrition. So I was going to go into corporate wellness. And I mean, I worked really, I'm not a stranger to hard work. Like I put myself through college. I worked 30 plus hours a week as a personal trainer to get myself through college and took out student loans and all that. Met my college sweetheart. But the funny thing is that there really wasn't the internet around yet. And so like there wasn't, I really didn't know like what my industry would pay, like corporate wellness, that kind of thing. But it's like, I found out my senior year that like the entry level, salary was about 25,000 a year. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I am screwed. I was like, I really picked the wrong degree. Cause I'm already 60,000 in debt just from student loans alone. So I started searching for just other career paths. And the funny thing is I was a personal trainer, like I said, through college. And a lot of my clients were in the medical device and pharmaceutical industry. And they would always like rave about their jobs and how great it was and all the stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to do something like that at some point. But anyway, one thing led to another with a couple of my clients, and I told them about this sort of snag. I was like, I just literally paid for 4 years of college to get a job that's going to probably take me another 10 years to pay off the loans I even went to college for. And so my clients were like, you're really personable. You should really try sales. And at the time I was like, I don't want to do sales. And one of my clients was like, you should really check out like pharmaceutical sales. So I did. And I did like a ride along with her. She helped me with my resume, and I ended up getting a job in pharmaceuticals. And dude, I'll never forget. I got a company car. My entry level salary in 1999 was $40,000 with another $25,000, for bonus and that kind of thing with an expense account. Like, dude, I thought I won.
You made it.
I did. I won the lottery.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, like the world is my oyster. So I did that. I was in pharmaceuticals for 4 years, and I got to be honest, I got insanely bored with it. I did not I liked it at first. I liked the perks, but I just got insanely bored. I felt like I was a walking commercial. Then a few years later, I got in medical device sales, which, man, I love that. I stayed in that industry for 18 years, and I got in there in 2003. And I loved being in the OR. Like that was like my thing. Like I would.
Why? What did you love so much about it?
I got my degree in exercise science and sports medicine just because I love science and I love anatomy and I love just everything like about like the body, how it works. Like I've always been so fascinated by all the, central nervous system and the muscles and everything. I just love it. And being able to help, a surgeon, navigate through using one of our devices to help a patient, you just feel so valuable, and you feel like you're doing a lot of good, and you're servicing some, a need. And it's just fascinating I got to be honest. I loved surgery, seeing it done. It was just very cool to me. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So from there, you get into that. You
Yeah.
love it. You keep talking about how much you loved it. So
Yeah.
where does it go from there?
So I did love it. I loved being a sales rep. And what happens when you're a really successful sales rep? Well, then they identify you for management, right?
Yep.
Oh, you're a great sales rep. You'll obviously make a great manager, which I think obviously is a mistake. But I got into management, and that's when I started to not like it. It wasn't the fact that I loved leading my team. Like I loved developing people. I loved leading people. The thing that I hated was the grind and the travel, because depending on what position I had, like when I finally left the industry in 2021, I was the national sales director. So I was covering the entire country. So I was never home. And I got to tell you, I was running the Dad Edge podcast up for 6 years up to that point. And it just felt like I was completely out of my integrity with it. And I mean, I was providing, a lucrative paycheck for my family. We had a lot of perks. When I was home, but I was gone Monday through Thursday, almost every week. And I'm like, I can't, and I'll never forget, like being on a plane, like, and this was kind of like towards the tail end of everything. And I've been traveling every week, and I used to just despise Sundays, man. I used to despise Sundays because I usually had to leave on Sunday night, or I had to leave Monday morning. It just ruined my whole Sunday. And I'll never forget like being on the plane. And at one point I was like, I'm going to get off this plane, and I'm just going to call my boss and quit. I was literally that miserable. I mean, here's what I'll tell you. I was making about 300 grand at the end of my career. And when people tell you that, money will buy you happiness, it was the opposite. I was actually happier making half that as a sales rep and home every night. Like I thought that was the best thing ever. So, towards the end, it really came down to just wanting to spend more time with my family. And that's what was killing me.
Yeah. I knew bits and pieces of that story, just hearing you talk about it through the podcast and stuff. Hearing you kind of lay it out, there are so many parallels with my path. Same thing. I was in sales, loved it, absolutely loved it. Sold insurance. I was an insurance advisor, sold life insurance, loved everything about it. And then got asked or voluntold to take a management role. And then that evolved into further and further into leadership and management roles. I actually didn't dislike that. I didn't mind leading folks. I love that part of it, having an influence. Like you, I struggled. Well, I've struggled with the further I went up in the company and the more responsibility I had, the more demanding the job became, which took my time and attention away from my family. It
Right.
was crushing me. And I
Yeah.
also struggled with not having, like, I'm not necessarily a control freak, but I like being able to exercise my creative thoughts. And when you're in a bureaucratic corporation, you just don't have that freedom and flexibility. So I was getting a little drowned out with that as well. But again, same thing. It had gotten to a very high paying job. The more money I made, the more unhappy I became. It was a direct correlation. The more money I made, the busier I was, the more unhappy I was. So same thing. I just kind of, again, I was building a business much like yourself on the side for years that gave me an out. But take us there and that point of the journey. Like, how did that, was the dad edge built to a point where financially it was a no brainer, or were you taking a bit of a gamble there?
No, it had been built for probably 3 years for me to
Okay.
leave.
Yeah.
But here's the really interesting thing how it happened. You mentioned that I had Matthew McConaughey on the podcast. That's actually when this whole thing went down. I'll never forget
Okay.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
it was May 5th, 2021. That's when that podcast released. The funny thing is so I'll take you back to January of 2021. The last company that I was with, I was there for 6 years. And I was in a leadership position the entire time. I was executive level management, basically running half the country up until I think the last 2 years. Then I was running the entire country, and I had scaled Dad Edge enough to where I really wasn't working in it that much at all. Like, I was just doing the podcast pretty much. I was doing
Right.
some coaching, but I was doing everything on my own time. I was work wise, I was getting everything done. Like, I was crushing my sales quota. I made plan every year that I was there. And the funny thing was, in January of 2021, my boss got let go in a restructuring. And I really saw the writing on the wall. And at that point, I was like, I think I'm gonna quit. I liked working for him. So I was just like, he's gone. It's time for me to leave.
Yeah.
And then our sales quota came out for that year. And I was just like, I looked at the sales quota. I was like, oh my God, this looks insanely doable. Like, so insanely. And I knew what our run rate was in our pipeline. And I was like, this might be the best year of my career I've ever had. And then I got my commission check in January. It was the biggest check I've ever got in my life. And I was like, maybe I'll stay another year.
Right.
So I was like,
Yeah.
I'll stay for 2021. Then I'm out. Then I got this boss, and she was awesome. I loved her. I loved working for her. And she was so amazing and so supportive. And she was very complimentary. Like, she wanted to promote me. She kept having all these conversations with me. She's like, I want to promote you to a VP position. Like, I don't want you, you shouldn't be doing director of sales. Like, I want you in the upper echelon of management. I knew what that looked like. You're on conference calls 8 hours a day. All you're doing is the bureaucratic BS. And in my role, even though I was the national sales director, I was just mostly just working with my reps. That was it. Because there was no middle management between me and my reps. So, like, I just basically managed this entire sales force, which I loved. And so all my time was spent there, and I didn't have to do a lot of the corporate stuff, which I love. They're just like, you go run this and you just go do it. And my boss, I'll never forget it. It was May, I think, 2nd. It was a Friday before McConaughey's podcast came out, and I was like 162% of my sales quota. And she was just like, Larry, you're one of the best people in the company. We want to promote you. We want to do this. And I'm like, I looked at her. I was like, I don't want to be promoted. Like, I didn't want to be promoted because I didn't want any more time taken away from my family. I didn't want any more time taken away from Dad Edge. Like, I liked where I was. Well, the McConaughey podcast came out that next Monday. And then I got a calendar request for a meeting with my boss and my boss's boss the next day. And I'm like, it's kind of odd. And the meeting title was Q2 expectations. So I get on this thing, and I'm like, and I just like sat there and I was like, this doesn't feel good to me. Something's wrong. So I get on this meeting, and she's sitting there, and so is he. And she's just looking at me like absolute pissed. And she's like, I would just get right to the point. What am I supposed to tell our CEO, which, by the way, I've never spoken to on the phone? He calls me on my cell phone and says, why is your national sales director interviewing Matthew McConaughey? She's like, what am I supposed to say to that? And I joked with her. I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to make the world a better place for families. And she's like, I'm serious. And I'm like, so am I. Like, come on. Like, and then her boss chimes in and he's like, Larry, seriously, like, what are we supposed to do about this? And I'm like, what do you want to do about it? I don't see a problem. Like, I'm not doing anything of competitive nature whatsoever. I do this on my own time. Look at my track record. Have I ever missed a conference call? Have I ever missed an expense report? You see me traveling with my reps. I'm 162% to plan. What's the problem?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, we're really concerned of the optics of this, and everybody's concerned, your commitment of time. And I'm like, I think I knew where this was going. And to be quite honest, I didn't care. And I just looked at him. I said, are you paying me for my time or my results? Like the last time I looked, when you're in sales, they paid you for results, not time. I don't punch a card, neither do you guys. Like, we are paid on results, period. And I was like, if you want me wasting a ton of time on conference calls and doing bureaucratic stuff that doesn't move the needle, I can do that, but it's not going to do any good. And you guys know that. And then it got all corporate-y. And she's like, well, the optics and this and that. And then she's like, and then she told me, she's like, well, I got to put you on a plan. And I'm like, what? You have to put me on a PIP? Are you serious? Why? She's like, we just need to audit your time. And I was like, you know what? I looked at my boss and I go, do you really want to manage me like this? Do you really want to manage me like this? And she's like, no, I don't. This is horrible for me. You're my best employee, like the best producer. I don't want to do this, but I'm being forced to. And I was like, well, I quit. And she goes, what? And I was like, I quit. You have my resignation. And she's like, you've got to be kidding me. This is the most lucrative year of your entire career. You are going to make more money this year than anybody in this division ever has. And you're going to walk away from that. I was like, if you're going to put me on this plan and audit my time, yeah. I was like, you don't want to do this. Neither do I. I was like, and I am not going to stop doing my podcast. I refuse. I was like, so every podcast that I produce, it's going to be like, you're going to wonder what the hell I'm doing. And that's not going to be any fun for either one of us. So we came actually to an agreement. I'm like, look, why don't you give me till the end of the month? It's the beginning of May. Give me till the end of the month. I will put everything together, all the intelligence, everything you guys need, and give me my bonus check at the end of the month. Give me my vacation time, and we'll call it a day. And she was like, this really sucks, but okay. And then right after that phone call, I went into my kitchen where my wife was, and I was like,
so that was going to be my next question.
I know, right? So she had seen like all these bonus checks for 5 months, and she was thinking like this was great. And I went into her. I was like, so I just quit my job. And she's like, what? And I was like, I just quit my job. And she's like, what happened? I told her what happened. And she's like, okay. She's like, and this is just the amazing wife that Jessica is. She goes, she does all the bills and I do. So she goes, well, what does this mean for us? I was like, the only thing this means for us is I'm going to start taking a paycheck from Dad Edge. I never took a paycheck from Dad Edge ever,
Right.
like for years. And she's like, so what are the differences I'm going to see? I was like, well, I'm not going to pay us what I'm being paid for my company, but I'll give us a decent base salary, just pay our bills and everything else can go into savings. And she's like, so we're going to be okay. And I was like, we'll be just fine. She's like, okay. And that was it.
That's awesome.
Never looked back.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing, man. But I'm glad you mentioned your wife, because that was going to be my question. How did you guys work through that together? My situation wasn't like one moment, like it was a build up and, I had to plan for it, but my final straw was my wife. I had to make her comfortable, I had to make sure she was comfortable with, like she would always say the right things. I support you. I'm on board. We're going to do this. We're going to be fine. But I need to believe it. And I remember, and I've shared this story before on the podcast, but the final moment that led to me a week later putting in my resignation, we were laying in bed one night and I was just like, look, Katie, I have to know. When I tell you these things and I'm thinking about leaving, going all in on the real estate business, are you true? Does that breed any anxiety in you? And she said, look, me and the kids do not give a shit how much money you make. We do not give a shit how much money you make. We want you here. And that was it. I made up my mind right there and worked on my letter of resignation, put it in the next week. And that was the end of the game. And I had to hear it that matter of fact from her to, make that decision. And then here we are. So that support of a spouse to go through such a big decision in life is crucial. And it sounds like she just needed to hear, are we okay? Are we good? Yep. All right, go for it. And that's so valuable, man. And I think for you, and I know for myself, that you couldn't have made such a big decision, which it sounds like you had made the decision, but you couldn't have done so confidently without knowing you had her support. So, yeah.
That is so true. And by the way, Katie, you are amazing. You are amazing. So many men would give anything to be married to a woman like you. So amazing woman you're married to.
She's awesome. So you do that. Now, I did not realize there was so much overlap, but from starting the Dad Edge to when you actually burn the ships on the career. So that breeds a few more questions I have, but I'm going to go back because I've heard you talk, and I kind of want to transition now to burning the ships on old Larry. So take a few minutes and let's start with little Larry, child. You had some trauma through your childhood that carried on right into your teenage years. I've heard you share that story on stage and with us several times. So walk us through that. I know that played a big role in shaping who you are, but then kind of where you got lost along the way and then dialed it back in. So take us down that journey.
So little Larry. So I think, yeah, there was definitely some trauma. My story is kind of unique, and just for the sake of time, I'll be pretty quick with it. So, my mom and biological father were married in 1971, and then they had me in 75. They got married very, very young. I think they were like 21 when they got married, so very young. And I think the marriage was already kind of really deteriorating already before I was even a thought. So, they had me. My mom and dad got divorced within a year after me. They split up. My dad left. I have no recollection of him even being there at all. It's just me and my mom. The funny thing is I still remember the story that I always tell is I remember when the video camera memories kind of like popped on, and I remember being in preschool, like right around 4, maybe 5. And I remember dads coming to pick up their kids from preschool. So I remember friends getting picked up from their dads, and I knew what a dad was, and I knew I didn't have one. I didn't really care. It didn't really bother me because in my mind, like, moms just find dads. Like, kids magically appear with the stork, and then sooner or later, the mom will go out, find a dad, bring him back home. And my mom hadn't found ours yet, so that was no big deal to me. I'll never forget being right around that age, and my mom told me one day, it was a Friday night, she's like, hey, she goes, I just want to let you know, I'm having a friend of mine over for dinner tonight. He's a very special friend of mine, and I really want you to meet him. That was her way of telling me, I'm dating somebody I work with, and we've been going out for a few months. It's time for you to meet him. So,
right.
But dude, I'll never forget this, when this guy walked in my house, and I had no recollection of a man other than my grandfather ever walking in my home who wasn't family. And I'll never forget when he came into our house. He was wearing a trench coat. He had a 3-piece suit on, a double Windsor tie. He was a white collar data software engineer for Citicorp back in the day. And he came walking in our house, and he was carrying this briefcase. He had a mustache. His hair was feathered. And I looked at him, and my very first thought was, that's a dad. Like, that's what a dad looks like. And he shook my hand, and I just remember like just beaming, like looking at him. And I was like, and the first thing out of my mouth was, are you going to be my dad? Wow. And like, literally, that's what I said. And my mom, I think, really kind of took that as like a Renee Zellweger, Tom Cruise, Jerry Maguire moment. And she like married the guy within like 5 months. Cause I think she was just like, I got to get this guy, got to put our family together. They were together for about 6 years, and it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. Like, they drank a lot. They fought a lot. They beat each other up. The cops were called to my house. He beat the crap out of me, beat the crap out of her. It was horrible. And by the time I was 10, they got divorced. He left. I've never seen him since. And what I'll tell you is I was really, really relieved when he left, but I was also broken when he left. I was like, well, they're not going to fight anymore, which is great, but God bless, I don't have a dad anymore. All my friends do. Like, this sucks. A couple of years go by. I start asking questions. My mom tells me she was married at one point, and I've got another dad out there. I had no idea that was a thing until I understood the birds and the bees. And lo and behold, when I'm 12, I actually met my father, my biological father. It happened by accident, had no idea. There's a huge, long story. I won't go into it, but we did meet. He only lived 3 miles from me, and I had no idea. And he was remarried at the time, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And dude, for like 6 months, I saw the guy every week, and I freaking loved it, man. Like, I could not get enough time with him. Like, and I called him dad immediately when I met him. And I was just so excited and eager that my dad was back in my life. And it was probably right around month 5. I just noticed there was a different dynamic in our relationship, almost like there was heaviness or stress or something. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I pick up the phone one day when I'm 12 and I call him and I'm like, hey, is everything okay with us? I just feel like something's off. And I probably just asked that in a very 12-year-old way. And I'll be honest, Jason, I don't remember what he said. I really don't. All I know is what happened. And what happened is I think the whole thing this is not going to work for me. And we exited each other's lives again. And that sucked. I really fell into a black hole after that. I gave up on school. I failed. Dude, I failed the 8th grade. I had to do 8th grade twice. And it wasn't because I wasn't smart enough. It's because I just didn't care anymore. So my mom continued to date and she got married one more time, but it was this revolving door of just absolute loser, toxic party animal men who were really into alcohol or drugs, and they were abusers, and they were just pieces of crap. And it was a horrible experience. And I said to myself, I was like, God bless. As the older I got, I was like, God bless. I was like, when I'm a dad, like when I get married, man, it's going to be one time. When I'm a dad, I'm going to do this thing right. Like I said, graduated from college, got a really great job in pharmaceuticals. My wife and I got married. We met in college, 30 years old. I'll fast forward to that. I'm in a Starbucks. My wife and I have been married for a couple of years. We're pregnant with our first son, who's now 18. I'm in a Starbucks for a business meeting for my medical device team. And who came walking in for his morning coffee but my father, who I hadn't seen since I was 12. And one of the women who were on my team, we were also very good friends. So I was friends with her. I was friends with her husband. Me, Jess, and them, like we hung out as a couple all the time. We were just great friends. So she knew my story. And she saw the look on my face when I saw my dad walk in. And she's like, is everything okay? And I was like, you're not going to believe this. I was like, my dad just walked in here. She's like, what? She's like, the guy from like 12 years old? I was like, yeah. She goes, where is he? And I was like, right there. He's like 50 feet away from us. And she's like, she got all excited and I was not. And she was like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And I was like, nothing at all. Like, what? I'm not going to talk to this guy. Like, I was almost of the attitude, like, screw him. Like, he doesn't even deserve my time. Right. And I make him sound like a bum. He's not. He's actually a very successful entrepreneur, still married to this day, 46 years to the same woman. I have 2 younger half brothers, but I wasn't going to go talk to him. So without even saying a word, she just got up and walked right over to him. And I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then a couple minutes later, I'm like, do I leave? They're talking and I'm like, get me out of here. Right. But he stood up, locked eyes with me, and he just walked over very humbly, extended his hand. And he's wearing like really nice clothes and everything. He's like, hey. He's like, oh my gosh. He's like, how are you? And I just looked at him like kind of puzzled and very indifferent. And I go, fine. How are you? I wasn't nice, but I wasn't like a total jerk, but I was right in between. And that meeting turned into what is now 20 years later. And we've had a relationship for 20 years. Like, I would have never thought that was possible. And it's not dad, son, but we're friends. And, yeah, it's been great. But Dad Edge got started. It wasn't until 6 years later. I told you I made a promise to myself. I'm going to be a good husband. I only want to be married once. I'm going to be a good dad, and I'm never going to hit my kids out of anger. Unfortunately, Dad Edge got started because I hit my 4-year-old, who is now 16, out of anger. And I never hit any of my kids up to that point. And I had a really bad day at work. I lost one of my biggest customers that day. I was in a really bad headspace. We were getting ready to move. So I was packing and I was packing up my kids' playroom. Spent like 3 hours and I felt super defeated. Lost my number one customer. It was going to cost us. It was literally like 60 grand in commission was going to be impacted. I was like, I don't even know how we're going to pay bills. But he came downstairs to play with his toys. I took a break. I told him, I packed up all this stuff over here. You can play with these toys over here. Please don't unpack anything. And what do you think a 4-year-old's going to do? For the love of God, I feel even dumb even saying that at this point. So I come downstairs, everything's pulled out. I'm freaking pissed out of my mind because I spent 3 hours packing this stuff and I just whacked him on the rear end. Unfortunately, I whacked him so hard on the rear end, he fell. And he didn't get hurt, but he fell. My son fell at my hand. And the thing that really kills me still to this day, I probably have told this story 1,000 times, but like the thing that haunts me still to this day is like, as soon as I did it, I knew exactly what I did. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do? Like, what the hell did I just, and I went to go help him. I went, sorry, this just sucks. Cause I, every time I tell this, I just see it and it just kills me. But like, I went to go pick him up and he looks up at me coming at him to help him up. And he just shut his eyes and put his hands up like, please don't hurt me. And I was like, oh my God, like, did I really just turn into like one of the guys that I was raised by? Like, this is exactly what I didn't want to do. And that was it. That was it. And it was that night I was like, I am not living like this anymore. Like, I am so sick and tired of, because I was not a patient father. I wasn't a very good husband. Like, I was mediocre at best at both. And I was like, I'm so good at my job. I was great at my job. I was good at other things like martial arts. And I really started thinking about those things. And I'm like, why am I good at this stuff? I'm good at this stuff because I've been trained to do these things. Like even the martial arts, like you do jujitsu. Like, you learn how to do jujitsu because you go to jujitsu, not because like you read a book on it or because you want to be good at it. Like, you do it because you learn. And like, that's how Dad Edge got started. It started with me like, I think I'm going to start a blog. And then a couple of years later, I'm tired of writing. I'm going to do a podcast because I want to talk to smarter people than me, kind of like you. And that was the change, that putting myself in that student position versus like my ego being like, you don't need any of this stuff. You can figure it out. Everybody else figures it out. I had no room in my life to want to figure it out. So that's how it started.
Man, that is, I've heard you tell that story. I heard you tell it on stage in Boston, and I got emotional when you told it because it takes me to a place, with my own son, where, a similar situation. And I'll share it. I've never shared it. But a couple of years ago, similar situation, not similar because it wasn't after a bad day. We were actually doing something fun. We were turkey hunting. We're big hunters. And my son, his brain never shuts off. He has to move. He's loud. That's the way he is, still is to this day. He's 8 now. And we're in the woods and a turkey's getting close. Turkeys, for those that don't know, they see very well. You have to stay still. And he was fidgeting, he was moving around, and he kept talking. And this wasn't out of anger. This was just to try to, in my mind, to make him be quiet in the moment. But I took my hand. He's sitting in my lap, waiting with a gun, waiting for a turkey. And I go like this to him, real kind of hard, right there. And I pulled my hand away, and blood's all over my hand. I gave him a bloody nose. I hit his nose so hard by doing that. Now he gets easy nosebleeds. That's always been a thing. But at my hand, to your point, blood's all over my hand. And and he's looking at me. He sees the blood, and I could see that terror. Like, Dad, what did you just do? He starts crying, and now the hunt is done, and now I'm thinking, crap. Like in his mind, I just made him bleed,
Yeah.
and that was tough. That was tough. And it sounds like I dealt with the same emotions that you did, when that happened. I have been on a journey since that time to do the very best I can and dealing, and you've been a big part of this journey, your group and the guys in your group and that tribe, but to do the very best that I can to understand that all the anger that comes from his actions I, I'm getting mad at an 8-year-old, at a 6-year-old, at a I'm letting them, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. His brain's all over the place, and he's just being a kid. And the scary thing, he's the exact same kid I was at that age, right? And my mom, I was raised by a single mom, and I won't get into my story with my dad right now, but she handled me with so much grace, so much patience, and I'm not given the same tools that she gave to me by modeling that for me. I wasn't giving it to my own child, so that I'm still on the journey. I still lose it sometimes. I don't touch him, but that anger gets up where I snap at him real fast and stuff like that. But it is getting better, and I think it will always be a journey. But sometimes it takes some pretty dark moments to get the ball rolling in the right direction. It sounds like you went through that. So, and good Lord, look at what has come from it. Look at what has come from it. So that led to you, sounds like right away, changing your mindset around everything, parenting, spouse, probably. I know you've said at that time, you weren't the healthiest thing in the world. Like you weren't eating very well and all of that. So you shifted, and it sounds like it was pretty instant. Did the podcast start right on the heels of that, or where did it go, and where did Dad Edge start building from there?
So in 2013, I started the blog. So like all this went down in 2012. Like
Okay.
2012, I started a Facebook page, like, cause I had no idea what a website was or a blog. I had no interest in even doing that. But the page was never meant for a following or anything like that. It was literally like my own personal diary, cause like, or what, a journal, whatever you want to call it, like lessons learned. Like I was just, what I committed to doing was I'm just going to go out and learn something new every day. So I would wake up early every day. I'd research something on how to be a better dad, a better man, a better husband, communication, patience, all these things. Like literally just would learn something. And I'd be like, oh, that's really fascinating. Oh, I'm going to try that. Oh, that's really cool too. So then in 2013, I did start a blog, Good Dad Project. And I was like, and I would just write about things that I was experiencing or learning or whatever. And the blog really didn't get a whole lot of traction, but I really didn't care because that's not what it was meant for.
It was an
meant
outlet for you, right?
Yeah, it was an outlet, just therapeutic outlet. And then in 2015, I was like, I really want to start a podcast on this because like, I think conversations would be better. And plus like, that's like a tremendous log. Like I can go back to any podcast and just re-listen to something, but the podcast really started to get wheels on it when I started interviewing, and it took about a year, started interviewing like really high level guests, like guys like Frankie Edgar, who he was one of my big guests in the beginning. And Boss Rutan, like I had a bunch of UFC guys on, like a whole slew of them came on. And because one UFC guy would, connect me to another. And well, then bigger names like John Bernthal, Matthew McConaughey, Sean Patrick Flannery, Greg Olson from the NFL, like all these pro athletes, all these actors. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And the funny thing is like whoever I would ask, like they would say yes. And I'm like, man, like, why are all these people saying yes? And like, I started asking people and they're like, how do I say no to a podcast on how to be a better father? Like, I want to talk about, that's the stuff I really want to talk about. Like like even Jocko, like I had Jocko Willink on, he was like, this is cool. He's like, I would talk about leadership, business, and task unit bruiser. Being able to talk about dad stuff is cool. Like, So, it really started, I think, exploding right around 2017. And then that's when we started like our coaching group, the mastermind. And I had a bunch of coaches who were working for me. And that's how I was able to scale out of Dad Edge and still work my full-time job just fine because I had other people working for me. But that's when things really exploded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. And obviously what it is now is kind of what I see. And you have so many tentacles of Dad Edge. Again, you've created such a good network of leaders and coaches within that handle every little tentacle of it. And I was able to physically meet, all of you guys here recently in Orlando, which was an amazing time. And I appreciate you organizing all that for us. But, the type of stuff we talk about, I'm a member of the Dad Edge boardroom. So it's a smaller group of business owners and things like that. And the biggest thing that I've gotten from it is like when I really dissect my life and my marriage and my kids and my business and everything like that, if I'm being completely honest, it's mostly put together, right? It's mostly good. But when you get in a group of people that most everything in their life is pretty good, you you have these conversations that we can all get vulnerable together, and we can find somebody that is dealing with the same type of little things that might be a little off in our lives, that you can lean on and pick their brain. And whether that be one of your coaches, I've gotten a lot of value from just other members of the group, and
Oh yeah.
we've got these separate accountability challenges and stuff like that going on. And so I want to give you an opportunity to talk about all the things that, and I'm gonna come back to a couple more questions, but while we're on the topic of your business and what you offer, talk about what you do offer, and kind of some tangible results you've seen from men that have come into this group and changed their lives through it. So
Oh, well, thank you very much, man. So we have two different programs. One is called the Dad Edge Alliance Mastermind. That's for our more career guys. And we now that's pretty much for anybody. And it was about 5-6 years ago, we started the Dad Edge Boardroom, and that's for business owners. And the reason we actually started, we used to just have everybody in the alliance, and we saw that business owners in the alliance would leave. And we would always, we have like exit forms and all that. And we're like, why are these business owners leaving? It's because they really weren't getting their need met. So we really started to like dissect that. Like, wait a second, like what needs do these guys have? And me being a business owner myself, I knew that there were needs. And like every guy I work with in the boardroom, like that we all own our businesses. So we know that like business owners, we're not better or worse than career people at all. We're just wired a bit differently, and we tend to be a little bit more scattered. We tend to be really crazy driven, and we will drive 90 miles an hour in a direction, and we're like, oh shit, I left my family behind a little bit, right? But we just, I think we as business owners, we have a greater need for efficiency and effectiveness and balance. And it's like, we don't want to waste any time. So that's why we separated the two, because the boardroom is a much more robust and in-depth experience, and you have to be a business owner to do that. The alliance is career. Anybody can join that one. We do have men apply for both. That's because we want to make sure like you're not a crazy person. But it really boils down to, what do? We help men in the boardroom with 4 different areas. So healthy mind, healthy body. You've got to have, great mental health. You've got to, you don't have to have a 6-pack to be a successful person or anything like that, but just being healthy, like just healthy, right? A healthy mind, healthy body just helps us operate just better. We also help men with marriage, communication, intimacy, frequency of sex. Like I'm talking like everything, like just really cultivating this incredible connection with your wife, right? We do not have to be like 85% of marriages that stick together who are just like, we're just settled and we're just sort of roommates and we're kind of checked out. 15% of marriages are absolutely optimal. And that's where we're getting our guys into, is that 15%. We also help them with the connection with their kids, like be efficient, effective, be really, really impactful with the time you have with your kids, right? And then we help men with business, and we help men continue to grow and scale their. We don't help men develop businesses. That is not what we do. We help men continue to grow and scale their businesses while they can optimize those other 3 areas, not leaving them behind. So what we say in the Dad Edge Boardroom is, you can have it all. You absolutely can if you learn how to do it right. So and then I do one-on-one coaching too. I only take on 10 clients at a time. I only have 1 spot open right now, but I do one-on-one coaching as well.
yeah, yeah, no, and I have, like I said, personally benefited from it, and it's opened my eyes to things. I'm not going to call them weaknesses or flaws, but there were areas in my life that I thought I had put together that, I quickly realized, no, there's room for growth in all these areas. Like I've been very fortunate, much like you, from an early age, because of some experiences with my father, and being raised by a single mother. It At 13 years old, I knew when I got married, that was it. And I was going to be the best dad ever, because I was exposed to the opposite of that. Right. So I knew all that. And I've been very fortunate with my wife. We have been rock solid since the day we met, and we've been together 17 years now, and it's never been a bump in the road. And I know, I mean, not a major bump. We all, like any couples, we argue and we fight about silly things, but I attribute that to my past of knowing what I didn't want to be as a husband and knowing what I didn't want as a spouse, right? So I was able to curate what I wanted and what I wanted to be. Having said that, in my mind, I've got it all figured out, right? As a husband, I joined the Dad Edge boardroom, and there are so many holes left to be filled, and I'm learning them, and I'm learning how to be a better communicator and listener with my wife, and all these things that I thought were quote unquote perfect. I'll never stop growing. That's the biggest benefit I've gotten from you and your group is it's never going to all be figured out. There's always room for growth. And I've made so much growth in the 6 months or so I've been with you guys, but I can now see so many areas where I can continue to get stronger. And you're that way. You lead this whole thing, yet you're so vulnerable enough to let us in on, hey guys, I'm going through a rough patch here and I need to lean on y'all to get through this. And you went through that kind of recently, didn't you?
I really did, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Like it's, you always question yourself when you're doing stuff like this. Like, if I'm vulnerable and if I share like the dirty laundry that I'm going through, or like how my head is just like absolute scrambled eggs when it comes to like, how am I connecting with my kid, or I'm losing my patience, or like whatever season we're in, like every human being is going to go through seasons of winter and fall where things are really, really hard. And then you're going to go through seasons of spring and summer where things are great. The past year has been really, really hard for me. And what I mean by that is I got injured a year ago. It's actually, as you and I are recording, I had surgery a year ago today. And that injury was pretty horrific. I was bleeding internally in my knee for 3 months. And like, it was bad. Like, I mean, they were talking like if they can't figure it out, they were going to like maybe amputate my leg. And like, it was horrible, dude. My mental health like just completely plummeted. My physical health, like because that went in the toilet, I was very irritable with my kids. I was angry at the world. This lasted for like months because like I went through probably 8 months of rehab after this surgery. And I finally got my wheels underneath me. It was right when I kind of met you, to be honest. Like that's when things started to really like the light started to shine bright again.
I'm
And
glad I motivated you.
You did. It was
Yeah.
all, I just kept looking at you as I was speaking at that event. I was like, okay, now I'm good. I'm back.
Right.
But it was really like, I just, I was in a hole really. And I just was very, I was quiet about it for a while. And then I was just super outspoken about it. I'm like, this is where I'm at, guys. I'm like leading this thing and I'm sucking right now. And I was absolutely, I should say I'm blown away, but I'm still not surprised because I've been doing this for 10 years. And I know every time a man is authentic and vulnerable and shares something like that, he's met with compassion. He's met with support and strategy of like, hey, dude, like, how can we help you? Like, and that's exactly what I was met with. It was actually met with such relief that the guy who founded the thing was also sucking at life for that season. And I was outspoken about it. But yeah, I mean, I think that vulnerability, that authenticity, like don't hide from it. If your life, the most powerful man in the room is the one who's got nothing to hide. And if, just, it's great to share great things, but it's also fine to share like, hey, I don't have this figured out and I suck right now.
Yep.
Because you'd be amazed at how many people are like, oh, thank God you said that. Cause I want to talk about that too.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I've had that, on my weekly calls with you guys, a handful of times where I'm struggling with how to articulate where my brain is on a certain topic. And then I hear another member in my little pod or whatever talk about the exact thing that I can't get out of my mouth. And I'm like, oh, you just said exactly what I'm thinking. All right, now let's have a discussion about it. Cause I couldn't get it into words. And that's happened 4 or 5 times, in the last several months. And then it just opens the floodgates on all these thoughts now get to come out. And like, you're feeling it too. Okay, let's vibe, man. Let's get on a call after this call and talk further about it. Love it. Absolutely love it. I got one question. Cause you mentioned you have an 18 and a 16-year-old, right?
Yes, sir. Almost 17 now. Yeah.
Yep. And you also have a 10 and an 8-year-old, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Big gap there.
Yeah.
Right. So from trying to think how I want to ask this. Your older kids got to see Larry as at not his best, right? They were young and they got to experience Larry not at his best. You're younger, and then they also saw that evolution of you turn into where you're at now. And you might have bumps in the road, but you're pretty rock solid as a dad now. Your younger two, from a timing standpoint, the way you laid out the timeline, it seems like they've never known anybody but the current Larry. So have you noticed any differences in the two sets of kids, right? Your older kids and your younger two, as a result of the influence you may have had on them as not so great Larry and now Larry?
It's a good question. I wish my older two were in here because like they're just like, Dad,
Right.
Dad, you would have never let us. You would have done this or that. I'm like, yeah, but I was also a jerk then too.
Right.
Like, here's what I'll tell you. You know, it's really interesting. So my two older ones, like, I don't know. I'm a big believer in God, and like I don't know if we just got lucky or what. I have no idea. All I know is my two older ones. That we just hit the lottery with them. Like both great kids, great at sports and good grades, and they always want to be home. They don't drink. They don't do drugs. Like it blows my mind that they have their crap together, because like I was such an idiot for so long. But they've turned out really, really good. And the other two, like I would say the biggest difference is I am way more patient. Like I've learned that now. Even when I see myself getting triggered, I know what to do now. Like, and I'm not saying I'm immune to losing my patience because I still have bad moments. But it's I've gotten out of my own way more times than not. My batting average of good moments versus bad has improved drastically. Do I still have bad moments? Yes. But the cool thing is doing this work is I actually get to recover from them faster. Like one of the cool things I've learned and one of the greatest lessons I've learned in this whole thing came from a podcast guest that was very unexpected named Figs O'Sullivan. I will never forget this guy. He had this incredible Irish accent. He's a licensed family therapist. And he said this one thing that like literally, I think lets all of us off the hook for bad things that happen in relationships. He said, the quality and the connection in any relationship, whether it's a mom and a dad, you know, husband and wife, you know, kid and parent, whatever, friendship, brothers, sisters, whatever, the quality of the relationship has very little to do with trying to navigate the relationship mistake free, because that's impossible. You are always going to screw up no matter what you do. The quality of the relationship actually comes in the repair. So it's how you apologize. It's how you own it. It's how you repair it. And I'm like, oh my God, really? He's like, absolutely. He's like, that's the stickiness. That's the super glue. And I was like, well, crap. I was like, with all the mistakes I make, I can repair all day long.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's a lot of truth to that. Like
Amen.
being able, you know, to apologize to your kids and repair.
Yep. Yeah. I'm gonna go back and listen to that episode. That's great. You said Fig O'Sullivan. Is that right?
Figs O'Sullivan. Yeah, that's his name.
All right, cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I was, I was curious about that before we even recorded today. Like you've gotten two sets of kids to experience two different dads in a way at younger ages, So, but it sounds like anybody that follows you, and if you don't, and you're listening, go follow Dad Edge and Larry on social media, because he shares a lot of these vulnerabilities, and a lot of his kids, he's very public with what they have going on. You shared a story recently where I don't know if it was your oldest or the next one that had an incident one night at a party or something. And you were his call, you were the phone call. And that was a big moment for you. And I think just sharing things like that, obviously they're inspirational, and, I appreciate it. One last question before we wrap things up. You've interviewed now 1,260 guests, you said 63?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
And folks from all walks of life, folks that are doing the parenting thing, the business thing, the husband thing, all these different areas that you've of expertise that you've talked to folks. Can you pinpoint 1, 2, or 3, or however many you want, common denominators that you see among the folks that you've talked to that are doing things at a high level in every area of life?
I would say here's what I've learned. No matter who you are, whether you're somebody like Matthew McConaughey, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue, Jocko Willink, from Extreme Ownership, all those different things, we all put our pants on the exact same way as husbands and fathers. It's being a husband, being a father. It's one of the most important. It's the most important thing to a man, and it's the thing that he wants to be the best at, no matter where he's at with his life. But we all put our pants on the exact same way, no matter who you are. You might be an elite Navy SEAL, but you know what? You could be humbled as being a dad, right? You might be a Hollywood actor, but you might be humbled as a dad and a husband and father. Like, we're all just learning together. I don't care who you are, because one thing I've learned about really understanding working with like these high level people is that that's it. We're all human beings when it comes to this area of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that, man. As you know, I've been, and my daughter is about to turn 13. So, it's just been a challenge for me to watch my little girl get a little older, and hit these teenage years. And I've struggled with that, internally. She doesn't see that struggle, but I've struggled with it. And I'll share this with you because, I've talked to you about this a couple times, but, we were riding together, just me and her the other day. And I'm going to try to tell this without getting emotional because it was a big, big moment for me. But it's just her and I. And she just recently, I've started sharing the story about my dad. So she, for years, thought that my stepfather was my father, right? So, well, just because all she's ever known is my stepfather, right? He married my mom, and he was married to my mom when she came into the picture. So, which is fine. But she recently, within the last year and a half, has figured out, and we've explained to her that my dad is no longer in the picture, and he's passed away now. So she knows that whole story. And a song came on, that I had already heard, but it's a Eminem and Jelly Roll song called "Save." It's Eminem redid Jelly Roll's song with his spin on it. And the song comes on, and I start crying in the truck, and she's sitting there beside me, and she's looking at me just like, what's wrong? And the song gets to, I get myself together. Why are you crying? And I said, well, that song reminds me of my dad and the stuff he dealt with. And I got to explain to her his drug issues, and we had a very adult conversation, and she started crying. I was like, why are you crying? And she said, do you get sad because you didn't have him growing up? And that's why I was sad. And I was like, I do. Even 43-year-old me now, I get sad that I didn't have my dad in my life. I didn't have a dad in my life. I had a lot of good men, but not my dad. And I said, why are you upset? She said, I could not live without you being in my life. And that, Larry, that was a moment, because I've been struggling with just how to connect with her and continue to keep that connection as she gets older and getting more mature and more thoughtful about things. For her to hit me with that, and just her to be vulnerable with me and not laugh at me because I was crying or think anything like that. She got emotional and shared that back with me. That's thanks to a lot of the work I've been doing because of you guys, and I appreciate it. And I just want to share that story because, for those that are listening, whether you have the resources to join Larry's group, or there's a bunch of dad groups out there, but there's power in getting vulnerable, recognizing, where you might have some weaknesses in your life, and joining a group that can hold you accountable and help you work through these things. And you don't have to do it alone. So Larry, I appreciate you for that. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and be our 100th episode. That's a big deal to me. We got a long ways to go to catch you. I don't know if we ever will, if you keep going.
Yes, you will.
But I appreciate all you've been to me, all you've been to my business partners, Bill and Tim. We've benefited greatly from you and your group. And I appreciate you coming on here, man. Any last thoughts you want to leave with the folks at home?
Just, can I end with a quote?
Sure. Absolutely.
I heard this quote. I'll never forget when I heard it, where I heard it, but it gave me the chills. And that is, the definition of hell is being on your deathbed and meeting the man that you could have become.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was about that quote, but that is something that is so powerful in my life because I filter decisions through that quote of like, because here's what I want. On my deathbed, I got to be honest, Jason, I don't want to be surrounded by stuff. I don't want to be surrounded by a pile of cash. Well, I mean, that would be great because I'll be leaving something behind for my family to be supported. I want to be surrounded by a pile of photos and my family, a pile of memories. As I look at my phone right now, I have 114,846 photos in my phone. And I guarantee you probably 70% of them are my family and moments and just random things. And I will tell you, that's what I want. I want to be smiling on my deathbed. And I want every man, every single man, whether he comes into our ecosystem in our programs or whether he just listens to the podcast or whether I never meet the guy ever, that's what I want for every man, is to be smiling on his deathbed, just saying to himself, it wasn't always perfect, but what a ride. What a marriage. What amazing moments with my kids. I don't know. I don't think I'd have it any other way. I'm ready. Like, I'm getting the chills just saying that.
Yeah.
That's what I want for every single man out there walking the earth right now.
I got nothing to add, man. I love it. I love it. Larry, I appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you back, brother.
All right, my man. Take care.
You too, brother.
All right, folks. What an absolute powerhouse of a guest. I knew what I wanted from 100th episode, and it was Larry Hagner. He's been such a influential piece of my life here recently. As you guys heard, he's got a phenomenal story, got some great insight, and I just enjoyed. I've gotten to know him very well, so a lot of what he talked about I've heard. But I'm very excited and grateful that he took the time to play such a big role in our podcast, and I hope you guys found as much value out of that as I have from Larry. I encourage you all to please go find Larry on social media. We'll drop all those links in the show notes. All of his social media links, his website, his Dad Edge community. He's got several options there. As he mentioned, he does one-on-one coaching. He's got the business owner boardroom, which I'm a part of. And he's got the Dad Edge Alliance. So I encourage all of you to check him out there. Again, I'm very excited to have gotten to this point. To most, it's maybe not a big deal. To me, it's a giant deal because this, while it's the thing that makes us the least and really no money, it's the thing I'm most passionate about, is being able to sit down with folks like Larry and other guests that we've had on and will continue to have on and dig into their brains a little bit and let them share with you their stories, their insights, their perspectives, their advice, their vulnerability, all those things. And as you could see with our conversation, both of us just sharing stories about our children and stuff like that, got a little choked up, and that's okay. That's what this is all about. And it's okay. And I'm fine being that way. And I'm glad he was vulnerable enough to be that way in this conversation. All we want to do, folks, is influence people in a positive way. We want to motivate people, inspire people. And if that's through talking about, some challenges in our lives, or if it's through bringing guests on, talking about all positive things, either way, we want to inspire folks. And that's how I, set out a year ago with this podcast, and nothing has changed one single bit. And we hope we continue to do that. So how can you help? If you're listening and you've been a fan for a year, or you're just finding us now, through the recent guests we've had on and whatnot, the way you can help is whatever platform you're watching or listening on. Watching would be YouTube. That's our only video platform. But if you're listening on any other platform, first off, subscribe to wherever you're listening. Most platforms have an option to subscribe. And then leave us a rating or a review. I know I say this every episode. I cannot stress the importance enough for us to reach more people with this thing. The number one thing we can do is have our listeners hit, like on Apple, you can simply hit 5 stars. It's a push of a button or a thumb on your phone screen to hit 5 stars. Do that for us. It helps a lot. And then if you could take an extra 30 seconds to type a review for us. So leave the rating and then type a review. What that does is it feeds the platforms into their algorithms. And if they see activity like that on a particular podcast, they're going to naturally, their algorithms pick it up and they promote it. And then as people are searching mindset podcasts or they watch another similar podcast, we'll start showing up in their feed and be exposed to those people. And that'll get more attention on our podcast and inspire more folks. Another thing you can do is go to wherever you're listening, whether it's YouTube or one of the other platforms, and copy the link and just text it or email it to one of your buddies, somebody in your family, a spouse or whoever it is, and share it with them and tell them to check us out. It might be, maybe they won't, but you doing that, if we can get every listener doing that once a week, once a month, is really going to help us grow the attention on this podcast. And that's how you can help us out. As always, we're sponsored by 608B Capital. 608B Capital is a real estate debt fund. We do short-term loans to real estate flippers and rehabbers and whatnot. We are set up as an investment fund, so we are open to take investor capital. We offer very good returns to those investors, and then we take that money and we lend it out to flippers and rehabbers, like I said. If you're interested in more information on that, on either side, whether it be as a borrower of our money or an investor into the fund to earn a return, reach out to us via email, social media. All of our links are down below in the show notes, and we're happy to talk to you. With that, that wraps up episode 100. It's definitely a celebration for us, and we hope you guys have enjoyed the first 100 episodes, and we'll stick around for the next several hundred because we're not going anywhere. So thank you for listening to Burning the Ships. We'll talk to you guys next time.